But that kept me going. It's like, well, I don't want to be. I don't know what is here. I don't know what's next for me, but I really don't want to go back. So I just kept going in the darkness and just kind
Yes.
of found my way. So yeah, now I live in a clay house and poop in a bucket. So anyway, there's the long story on that, I guess.
Happy Friday, Outsiders! Woo! This week's interview is with my new friend Michael. He lives in a clay hut 3 hours away from St. Louis, Missouri, and he lives with a community of people, and he calls them back to landers. So it's really, really interesting. He's very smart and very funny, so I hope that you enjoy and maybe have some new perspectives from this interview and get something out of it. Thanks! Also, the interview was pretty long, so I split it up into 5 parts. I linked to all of the parts below in each video, and I really hope that you watch all of them and enjoy them. And if you do, please like and subscribe to my channel because I really appreciate it. Thank you. Hi, well, thanks for meeting with me.
Oh no.
I learned about where you're living, and that's why I wanted to talk to you. So
Okay.
Can you explain that a little bit?
There's this back to landers movement, and land is very cheap, so people have gotten many acres, and then they kind of steward it. And so I live on my friend's property. She has 11 acres, and I live in a clay house.
A clay house?
Yeah, well, it's actually cob is the technical term, because clay, you take clay and you mix it with sand and straw, and then that makes like an earth and cement, and then you can build with that.
And you built it yourself?
No, I didn't. She built it before I knew her.
Wow.
And so she kind of gave it to me, and I'll give it to someone else,
Why did you decide to do this?
Well, for me, Ishmael, Daniel Quinn is kind of really, I related to that. I went to film school, and then after that I just went into sales and did sales for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years or something. And I was just so depressing. I was like, is this all that life is? I just work and granted, there's people suffering so horribly, and so I'm just like, oh, my life is so awful. Not like that, but
I know what you mean. You just felt like you were just making money to pay bills, and
and it's like, is this all that there is in life? Is just until you retire and then you die, and so when I read Ishmael, that really sort of painted the bigger picture for me. And then there's another documentary. It's called The Century of Self, and that really, it's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's like 3 hours long. I only watched the first 40 minutes. For me, it really resonated with me. Now, someone else, like you were referencing The Alchemist, that, so everyone sort of has their own path and their own things that mean something. And but for me, that one was about how they created a consumer society out of nothing in the early 1900s. People bought what they needed, and that was it. And one kind of quick example from it is it was taboo for women to smoke cigarettes. And the cigarette companies were losing half of their market because of some social norm.
Right.
And so the documentary is about Freud's nephew. I forget his name, but he's a really
Sigmund Freud.
Yeah, his nephew. Is pretty clever and famous. And so during the women's suffrage movement, women's fighting for their right to vote, he had some stand-ins that had cigarettes under in their girdle or under their dress, tied to their leg. And when he would give the signal, they would all pull out and start smoking. It would be completely scandalous. And he was standing next to some reporters, and he called out to them, or he pointed, or whatever the sign was, and they all smoked, and of course gasped. And he called out, "Look at those women smoking their freedom torches." So freedom torch is statue of liberty. And so all of a sudden, it got headlines in the paper. So all of a sudden, overnight, you had women fighting for their own right to smoke cigarettes because they were now associating it with freedom, with feminism, and any man that was against it was against forward progress, and we, by golly, are going to vote, and we're going to kick ass. And so overnight, you had the movement created itself. So these women were wanting to consume cigarettes because they associated something with it. So it's just really scary. I mean, I'm a product of that culture too. Yeah. And so where do I start, and where does
you were trying to kind of create some type of distance between you and society for the most part at the beginning?
Yeah, well, I saw that documentary pretty much. My friend that I live with, she sent it to me, so I was already sort of on board with going out there. But I had read Ishmael like a few years before I ever knew about the Back to Landers movement and stuff like that, and it was like, well, I don't like what I'm stuck in, but I don't know what to do about it. So I started. I was working 50 hours in sales a week, and I was just selling native plants in the city, and in my spare time, and I made my money back. Just, I mean, it was
Nice.
not much. It was $300 or whatever, but I was literally just doing it just as a very short hobby because I didn't have a lot of free time. I mean, that's a whole.
But you were happier.
And there's a whole nother story about why natives are important, which
Mhm.
another time. But anyway, so that's just what I was doing because I didn't know what else to do. So long story, but then so when I met her, and we became good friends, and then she invited me out to her land, and it's been her dream, and so that was my motivation. So like when you leave one culture and you go into somewhere else, you're kind of in the dark because or like people when they grow up in oppressive religions or very strict or Jehovah's Witness or things like that, when you leave, it's like that was your foundation. Even though you're like, oh, this is, I want to get out of this. It's like that was your association. And then so when you leave, it's like, well, I don't know what to believe anymore. It's like this void. And so going out there, that was sort of my little crux to hold on to. Like, okay, well, I know that I'm leaving something that was very toxic and I didn't want to be a part of. So when it got really hard or emotionally, I had things that I had to face, but that kept me going. It's like, well, I don't want to be. I don't know what is here. I don't know what's next for me, but I really don't want to go back. So I just kept going in the darkness and just kind of found my way. So yeah, now I live in a clay house and poop in a bucket. So anyway, there's the long story.
Time for part 2.